Hi everyone, welcome to the 55th episode of the Zicast. As always, I'm your host Ryan Zicast, and today I'm joined by martial artist Coach Britt Soden.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'd like to shout out episode 3 guest Ryan Agnello for technical directing. So, Coach, I think you know a bit about what I do with the Zicast here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to get to learn more about you and your career. So, to start things off, how about you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure, which is always the most awkward part for me. I've never been good at talking about that stuff. But so from a martial arts perspective, I started when I was about 9 years old. I think just like any other kid, I wanted to what action heroes were doing martial arts at that time, and I wanted to look like that. And for me as a kid, it was like Jean-Claude Van Damme and stuff, so I liked all the kicking, and I was always like a pretty athletic, like flexible kid. So my parents started me with Taekwondo, which I enjoyed for quite a while because it allowed me to have that outlet and kind of live out those fantasies a little bit. But as I got older, and had some experiences, which is kind of a long-running theme with my transitions in martial arts, are like personal life experiences. I realized that it wasn't doing me any good with actual fighting. So I made a transition to boxing. My parents had me in a program at the boys club, and I started boxing. I really liked that because it was more contact. In Taekwondo, we didn't have a lot of contact. Not for the little kids, at least at that level. But boxing was the complete opposite. It was, there were no uniforms, no belts, none of that. So, and I kind of liked that. I liked that it was more of a proving ground. And then into high school, I kind of was in limbo with martial arts a little bit. I was experimenting with different things, and a little bit with Filipino martial arts. With if you know anything about that, there's a martial art called Kali, which is stick fighting, knife fighting, a little bit more, useful for real violent encounters. You can imagine like fighting with a knife or a stick is a little bit different than just kicking boards and stuff. I didn't take well to the instructor, so I moved on from that. I stuck with it intermittently throughout high school, but it wasn't for me. And then once I graduated high school and moved to Los Angeles for college, I had a fellow student who I was talking to him about martial arts, and I was, thinking about getting back into maybe boxing or Filipino martial arts again. And he told me his dad was a Filipino martial artist and was an instructor. So he had me come to his house, and I started training with him in his garage. They just had like a little setup in the garage, and it was pretty cool. And different experience from the Filipino martial arts that I had done here, just instructor wise. I really took to this instructor. Those private lessons essentially became very expensive for me as a student. And he had suggested that I come to a gym that was close by, where he was running a mixed martial arts program. He also taught mixed martial arts, and he had done a lot of Muay Thai kickboxing. So I did that, and he gave me a pretty good break on a membership, which was very kind of him. Being the smallest, youngest one for the most part there, I got beat up quite a bit. But it was a sink or swim situation. He was allowing me to come there and not really have to pay a full membership, and I paid with my work, with the work I was putting in, essentially. And I'm forever grateful for that, because it started me on a journey of getting into mixed martial arts. And I kind of went a little backwards. Where I started, that program was a MMA pro. There was wrestling and no-gi grappling, Muay Thai kickboxing, and we were doing it all the time. But I really gravitated towards the kickboxing. Like it came natural to me, probably because of the Taekwondo background. I like kicking, and I had some boxing skills from boxing. So I got pretty passionate excuse me, about kickboxing and Muay Thai. And I liked jiu-jitsu as well. It didn't come as naturally to me, though. I had to work at it. So I have, and to this day, I still have a love-hate relationship with jiu-jitsu, you know. But ever since then, those, you know, those core styles and systems have been part of my training. Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing. And then after moving back to Connecticut, I had a few bad experiences in California with some unsavory people. I was robbed at gunpoint, and those experiences, again, real life experiences, right, dictating where I was going to go, had me realize that where not necessarily the skills of jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and boxing weren't useful for those types of situations, the way I was training them and the goals and how we were training them were not being applied to those types of situations, right? So, you know, competition is much different than having somebody put a gun in your face. And luckily in those situations, I didn't have to do anything, but the way my brain was working was what if I wasn't, and what if I did need to do something, and those skills weren't doing it for me. You know, that type of training wasn't fulfilling that aspect of what I felt I needed from martial arts. So I had moved back to Connecticut, and I was talking to a friend of mine about, you know, I took a little break from training as I transitioned back here and got settled, got a job. And I was talking to a friend and telling him I'm looking to get back into training. I haven't been here in a while. What's going on? What's in the community? And I'm looking more for self-defense. And he had recommended Krav Maga. So I had heard about Krav Maga quite a bit. I never really looked into it because I was really focused on the competition stuff, you know. So I went online and I found out that there was a Krav Maga school 5 minutes away from my house. So I went there and took my first class, and from that day forward, that became my main focus. Like I was hooked. I realized that had everything I was missing from the other systems as it related to what my personal goals were, had the answers for me. So and I kind of, they all snowball a little bit, right? And they cluster together and form this bigger ball. I still am very active in the other arts, not as much as as I am in Krav Maga, but they will always be a part of my training. And that just is right now and for the foreseeable future where my focus is. And if I had to pick, you know, what 3 things I focus on the most nowadays, it would be Krav Maga number 1, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I could be doing more of all of them but teaching it full time now, as well as teaching here at Quinnipiac and having a family, you kind of, it's a push-pull. You got to really figure out, you know, between teaching it full time and finding the little moments to train on your own, you've got to prioritize, right? And my priority is always self-defense. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah. So you were able to really touch upon like almost all aspects of martial arts in your training.
Yeah. I mean, there's, when you really zoom out in martial arts, there's so much, you know, there's so many different styles and versions of style, like offshoots of one. You might have one style that has 5 different offshoots of that one style. You know, you could really get into the weeds with it. But when you're looking at the core fundamental fight skills, you know, things that you're seeing in MMA competitions, just striking and grappling, you know, wrestling, submission grappling, boxing, even something as not as easily understood from most people as like cage work in MMA, working up against the cage, which we take for self-defense as, you know, what if we got into a fight in this room right now? I don't think we have to worry about that. We're going to end up against a wall or something, you know, and you being able to take those skills and move them over to self-defense application is really useful. You know, the way I always look at it is like MMA for sport, and then anything that's for self-defense, they're just two different roads on the same map that oftentimes will intersect at different points, you know, and just end up in different end destinations.
Yeah.
But yeah, you kind of, you know, and for me, Krav Maga it's a mixed martial art in itself. You know, we're doing a lot of everything, which is something that draws me to it more now than, you know, ever, is when I have limited time. I want to make maximum use of that time for my goals, and Krav Maga isn't limiting. You know, if I were to just focus on jiu-jitsu, I wouldn't be doing any striking. You know, the stand up in jiu-jitsu is limited to some minimal clinch work and takedowns. There's no striking. There's no striking on the ground. Not that you can't also do those things. It's just not as focused on. So Krav Maga allows me to kind of focus on, it could be whatever I want it to be. You know, on one day, if I want to go in and do grappling, I could just do a grappling class. If I want to just do some striking, we do striking. If we want to add weapons into that, we can add weapons into that. Multiple attackers, you know, it allows us to kind of, it encompasses everything. So it's very diverse.
Yeah. And this really makes me reflect on what you talked about with the situation of you being robbed. It's like a gun just makes it an inherently unfair fight, and like you're a top one guy you don't want to mess with, and then like you introduce that into a situation. It's like doing all that training. It just like I said, it just makes such an unfair situation.
Yeah, it's the great equalizer, right? It's why an 80-year-old woman with a pocket pistol can potentially survive a violent encounter with a much younger, much fitter, stronger, you know, opponent, because that equalizer is so effective. You know, it really does. It changes the game, and it makes you rethink your approach to how you're dealing with those situations.
Yeah, nothing beats lead in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a powerful tool.
Yeah. And on a lighter note, you talk about like being inspired by like 80s action heroes. Have you ever watched Cobra Kai?
Of course. Yeah.
You remind me so much of Johnny Lawrence.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Well, you know, I watched the first season, and I'm behind now, admittedly. And Karate Kid was huge in my childhood. You know, and it's interesting to me how they ran with that idea that he's the good guy. You know, kind of. So, I guess I'll take that as a compliment. Then,
you should, yeah.
Maybe if we were like in my childhood right now, I'd be a little bit more angry because I wanted to be Ralph Macchio. You know, I wanted to be the good guy. But then you get older and you see all the memes about how he was actually the instigator and the troublemaker. You're like, oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Cobra Kai has made Johnny Lawrence a legend in his own right. So that is very much a compliment.
What a great like comeback for that guy too, just like with that series, you know. That's awesome,
because he was always playing the bully, like even in Back to School, I think he was William Zabka was the villain.
Same thing. Basically the same character,
and then he's been able to kind of reinvent himself in this way, which is so cool. And I want to circle back to you talking about like competitions, and I like to ask you like any tournaments you've been to and stories you'd like to share from that.
So when I first started, I mean, there's so many. I mean, even cornering, you know, because once I stopped competing, I had the opportunity to, when I started teaching, to start cornering other fighters and coaching other fighters. I mean, which I preferred. Competition for me was, my drive to compete was very intermittent. Some people that I know and have trained with and, you know personally in the fight world, they'll compete one weekend and then they're ready to go the next weekend. It was never like that for me. I would get like a really big rush to want to compete, and then I would get that out and I'd be, I'm good for a long time. You know, I can go long periods in between. I didn't have that drive to keep competing. And if you want to be like any sort of champion at anything, you know, whether it's local or regional or national or worldwide, you have to have that drive to want to be there. It's more of a mental thing at that point. And I didn't have that. So I really liked helping other fighters reach those goals. even at the smaller levels. But when I first started competing, it was, you didn't have, like now, if I was to corner you and you were going to go fight, it would be streamed on, like everybody can watch it. It's going to be on YouTube. When I first started, you didn't have that. If you were lucky, you did a fight and you'd get like a copy of a VHS, and then maybe later a DVD or something, and it wasn't all out there on the internet. And it was also very in its infancy with proper organizations and working with the athletic commissions and how you're going to sanction matches. So a lot of it was very gray area. You're not a professional, you're not an amateur. I guess if you're not a professional, you're an amateur, right? If you're not getting paid, you're an amateur. But then you'd also kind of get paid. It was, there's all these little gray areas. So the bulk of my early competing was, not very organized. It was, it's all very, looking back on it now, it's stuff that I would never put my own fighters through. So it's all safety issues, people aren't like, they weren't as strict with proper weight, things like that. So, I mean, I've been lucky and fortunate personally that I've never had any really horrible experiences. Although I had a kickboxing match where a guy weighed in like 20 pounds heavier than me, and they still allowed the match to go on. And those are all that kind of stuff is always ongoing. You'll get stuff like that all the time. People lying about their weight, people sandbagging, saying that I was cornering for somebody one time, and there was another fighter on the card, and they were telling the opponent was he had 0-0 record, no fights, but he was from another country. Turns out in that other country he had like 10 fights. So like there's always that type of nefarious stuff going on, to kind of stack the things in your favor. And I never liked that about the fight. I always, I had like a pure vision of it, like you want it to be as fair as possible. But me personally, aside from that one time, I don't have any like crazy like fight stories, won some, lost some. No, luckily no really bad injuries. A dislocated rib on one, the worst injury I have is the one I got a year ago, that training, so I was very lucky in that sense. I've seen a lot of stuff at fights, in the green room, the warm-ups, other people fight, coaches between teams fighting, that stuff gets pretty interesting. So as kind of from the outside looking at it, I've probably, witnessed a lot of drama. Me personally, I'm a very introverted, quiet person. I keep to myself, When I was in those situations, I was very tuned in to me and focused, and I would train, and I tried not to let my view of competing get too wide, because then I felt like my head was going to get too flooded with thoughts from this person and that person, or if I saw something, it was going to affect my approach, or it was just going to get in my head too much. And I was like, odds are stacked against me. I don't have the competitive drive anyway. So I was worried that any little thing that got to me, I would be like, no, I'm out, I'm done, but I wasn't a quitter either. So I always tried to see it through as much as I possibly could. I mean, I don't have a lot of crazy competition stories. Pretty run of the mill, just some basic stuff. Nothing exciting. If you watch those fights now, in my head, they seem like they were 10 seconds long, because your head just gets the compilation of all the hits, you know what I mean? Like it gives the best of, but you're talking 3-4 rounds of mostly two very nervous guys, not wanting to get hurt, not wanting to destroy, it's, unseasoned athletes at that point, you know, very uncomfortable, very nervous, a lot of nervous energy. Yeah, but no real serious, nothing exciting, which sounds weird because anybody who doesn't compete would be like, you're locked in a cage with a person fighting. Like, that's pretty exciting. And yes, but comparatively, you know, to other fights, I've seen I've seen a lot of bad injuries, you know, being as a spectator in person or cornering. But yeah, I've made it out pretty unscathed from the competition standpoint.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm really curious to hear more about like the mindset of a competitive fighter, because you talk about like just two scared human beings in a ring, and you talk about like what people would think who don't compete. So do you have anything more to elaborate on just like being in a fight like that?
I think what a lot of people think, especially, you know, if you're deep into any sport, I think you kind of you hear enough and you kind of study it enough, you can kind of understand where the athlete, you know, kind of what the athlete is, where they're coming from and what they're experiencing. But if you're just a casual spectator, I think sometimes you could look at, even if you're watching something like the UFC, you know, you could look at these professional combat athletes and think that they're not scared of anything. But you know, Mike Tyson was one of the people that come to mind, who was like, if you're not afraid, I mean, that fear is what is driving you. You know, you're scared every time you go in there. And I can't speak for everybody. You know, I've talked to people, and I kind of will call BS sometimes if, you know, they're talking and there's I wasn't scared. I kind of don't believe that, you know what I mean? Sometimes people can mistake that fear for like, they'll try to replace it with overconfident, you know, that's where they're getting all hyped up, you know, and they're trying to overcompensate with this big energy to kind of mask the fear. But the reason they're doing that is because they're afraid. You know, for me personally, that walkout, the waiting around in the green room beforehand, warming up, right between warm up and walking out was the nightmare. You're that waiting, you're shaking, you feel, for me, my hands would get heavy and numb. I would feel like there's no way I'm going to be able to lift my hands. You know, you start to get, your whole body gets hot. My body, I'd get all itchy, you know, it just get very uncomfortable, but I'm scared, you know? And then you walk out and there's all the people and cheering and you got the music and it kind of goes down a little bit. And then for me, it would always come back right after you get in, they close the cage. And it's not like when you're watching from home, you could be talking to people there with you, you know, you feel that uncomfortable silence in that cage, you know, and you just hear that floor bouncing, and every once in a while a shot lands and you hear some oohs and ahs from the crowd. But it's not like, you know, when you train, you got music going, you're pumped up, it's all energy and it's fun. But when you're in there, it's like the silence is deafening, you know, and your heart's racing. And I would say that I never settled into not being scared, even when I was in there. I'm always, and some would say that that's what kind of gave me I was a strategic fighter. And I think it's because I was scared. Like, I knew if I was going with somebody who was a good grappler, I was very cautious about not grappling. Or if I knew they were really good in the clinch or they were going to throw me around, I was very cautious about letting them get too close to me. So I think that fear allowed me to develop a pretty good fight IQ and like be able to strategize in the moment, in real time, you know. It doesn't always work out that way, but in general, but yeah, for me, I was always scared. You know, I never felt really pumped up to get in there. It almost felt like I just got to get in there and do it and get out. You know, I would say that probably there's a part of me that like, okay, that was fun, you know, but most of it for me was just why did I do that? You know, I'm making no money. The weight cut was terrible. I've been eating boiled chicken and broccoli for how long now, you know, and then the week of the fight, your diet is water and air. You know, you're not really, you know, and then again, unless usually for people who, you know, they have that competitive drive, that drive makes those other things look, that's not important, you know, it's just par for the course. But for me, I really like sat in those things, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like sitting in the sauna suit, in the sauna, sweating, did multiple sessions of that. Like, it was just miserable, you know? I'm glad for the experience of it as somebody who does this for a living, for sure, you know? I think it's important to have that experience. But yeah, I was not built like some of these guys who are, you know, wake up the next day, they're ready to go, you know. I was always back in training. I never allowed it to like set me back from training because I liked training. But the drive to like do the play the game, get on the field, it just wasn't there. Yeah.
Interesting. And you talk about like Mike Tyson with fear. I know he also feared what he would do to people too.
Yeah. I mean,
which is a component as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think I was I was a small guy. I was never worried I was going to hit anybody so hard that I would do to them what Mike Tyson can do to somebody else, you know. But I do understand that aspect. But I think he would use, you know, he used that to a great benefit for him. You know, he's one of the best champions in all of combat sports, you know. And that's just, it's like he's like a pit bull. It's just pure violence bred into him, you know, from a young age. So just a different beast. And I think everybody has their different upbringings that kind of shape the way that they're going to approach that type of thing if you're a fighter. And I was probably never on that extreme of the spectrum, you know. So it gave him the edge for that type of stuff for sure, you know. But yeah, and I don't think I ever got too in my head about scared of what's going to happen to the other guy. You know, I was definitely more worried about me, which sounds terrible. But I think that was a lack of confidence on my part that I was going to be able to do anything, you know, to really, you know, damage this person, you know, when looking back, I mean, that's obviously not true. You know, there's two adult athletes hitting each other and twisting each other's joints as hard as possible. I mean, you could really hurt somebody, you know. I think about that now when I have fighters, you know, I want them to understand there's a fragility there between both people, you know, and you need to be humble and not be a cocky fighter and understand the risk both of you are. It's a great risk you're both undertaking to get in there and fight each other, you know. There's like a level of honor and respect that I think sometimes kind of gets lost in the entertainment of it, you know. Yeah.
And it's fitting you bring up Mike Tyson, because something I joke about to my friends is that if I ever become a big enough celebrity, I'll fight Jake Paul when he's old. So like I'll Jake Paul.
Yeah, nice, smart.
So like if I ever need someone in my corner, I'll reach out to you, Coach.
I mean, he knows he's gonna know what it feels like then. You know? It's like he should see it coming. You know. Yeah, I'll be there.
Thank you, Coach. Yeah. So of course I know Mike Tyson definitely collected his check from that, but it was. Yeah, just sad to see arguably the greatest fighter of all time go out in such a sad way. But
yeah, I know. And I I don't know if it was the day before or earlier that day, I had, you know, made a Facebook post, and I'm a Mike Tyson fan. I don't like Jake Paul as a celebrity persona, you know, you know, but he's an athlete. And he could box, and he's dangerous. And Mike Tyson's 117 years old. You know, it's like
in the world of boxing.
Yeah. I mean, he's just he's been out of commission for 20 years. You know, it's like and then people forget he had that exhibition match like 3 years ago, and he didn't perform well in that either. You know, it's how well do you think he's going to perform against a much younger, much stronger, faster, more game opponent? You know, age, you know, Father Time is undefeated. You know, you can't beat that. So I didn't, as much as in my soul I wanted him to knock Jake Paul out, I knew it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I knew if Tyson was going to win, he had to win early. And then once that didn't happen around that third round, I knew it was probably over. Just Jake Paul could just outlast him.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to give Jake Paul too much credit, but I feel like he took a very respectful route in that fight, and he could have. There were several moments where he could have teed off on Mike and went in for the kill, and he restrained himself. He picked some shots. You know, he allowed Mike to kind of go out with some dignity. You know, it would have been a lose-lose to knock him out.
Yeah,
because then it's, you know, okay, great, you knocked out the older guy, but then you have the other camp who are gonna be like, oh, it's fixed if you knocked him out. You know, so I think it was a smart move on Jake Paul's fight, the way he fought that fight.
Yeah, like bowing to Mike at the end too. Like that was a great route to take.
The two brothers are like evil villains, you know, and they've just come into that character. They're gonna play that up, you know. And I don't, from a earning a living standpoint, I don't blame. Like, let them do their thing. You know, who cares?
Yeah.
You know, it's not a big deal. It's like professional wrestling at that point.
Yeah, and they brought a lot of eyes to boxing as well.
Absolutely.
Like the two female fighters who preceded the fight with Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, which was an amazing fight.
Great fight. Yeah. It's the only, I saw clips of some of the earlier fights. That was the only one I watched in full. The females and then the main event. And that was a really good fight. The real boxing was on display. Whatever you feel about the outcome of it, she was robbed, she wasn't robbed, complete, you know, different conversation. But that was a great display of good boxing, that whole fight. You know, if I had somebody over to my house to watch that card, you know, like the next day we're gonna rewatch it, and they weren't into boxing, that's the fight I would show them. You know, it's a really good fight. Yeah,
just bury the film of the Jake Paul Tyson.
We don't need that.
Yeah. Moving on, Coach.
Yeah.
Of course, we know each other because you're my jiu-jitsu coach for a class that I had. I'd like to ask you some mentors you've had and the best pieces of advice they've given you.
Oh, that's a good question. Man. I've had a lot of good instructors. I think I've probably taken something from every instructor. That's one that I probably should have prepared ahead of time because
no worries.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of, like, you know, I have so many nuggets of wisdom now that's what happens as a coach, right? You take what your coaches have given you, and if you feel it's useful to you, it could be useful to your students, you pass that down, right? And I usually try my best when I'm doing that to kind of cite my coach and give them credit, you know, make it not seem like it's my own thing that I'm taking. But that is, I would say that's daily when I'm teaching classes. I've of course developed my own style of teaching at this point, but the stuff that I still use, you know, not just the physical stuff, but the emotional stuff, the sort of the little nuggets of, you know, information. I still use stuff from pretty much every instructor I've had, even ones that I didn't particularly like. I think that there's, you know, if you're training with somebody long enough, for me it was hard. If I didn't like you, I probably wouldn't be there too long, no matter how good the stuff was. Like, I have to, like, kind of have that connection to want to be there and learn from you. But even in those situations, there are little things that I probably took and still use. Most of it is, you know, motivational, like not just for self-defense, but for competition. You know, everyone's got their like motivational quotes, you know, basically turns into, you've got all these motivational memes in your head and you're saying them all the time. They just become part of your script almost, you know. A lot of that stuff is from previous coaches. If I had to like, you know, pick like a handful of my favorite coaches and what the ones I've learned the most from, yeah, that's a really tough question. I've learned so much from so many. A lot, especially with Krav Maga instructors, because I've trained with so many of them. The Thai coach that I trained with for a while and, you know, went out to Thailand with and trained with him, big language barrier. So there weren't a lot of like specific nuggets that I remember from that verbally, but training wise, you know, and sort of pace, intensity, the style of training, that stuff sticks with me still, you know. His name was Tae Win. My original Krav Maga coach from here, even though we eventually became business partners and then had a falling out, and we're not on speaking terms at this point, but it's a completely separate thing from what I learned from him as his student, and him being my Krav Maga instructor. You know, huge influence on just forming the basis for how I teach Krav Maga, and that stuff has seeped into how I teach jiu-jitsu or how I teach Muay Thai. You know, it's kind of just become my taking all of those things and collecting them, and then injecting a little bit of my personality. Now we've taken that and I've got my own little style of teaching and my personality for how I teach, which isn't for everybody. But it is what it is, and it's the way that I teach. And it really is a mixture of pretty much everybody that I've ever trained with, you know, in some way or another. To pick specific little nuggets from each person, I probably, man, that would take a while. And I'd probably have to do it in the moment. Yeah, I'd probably have to be teaching and then go, oh, that's from this person, you know. But yeah, that is a really good question. And I want to think on that more, you know, at a different time.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be episode 2 or something. Get more in
when you start up your own podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe I have some of them on and talk about those things. Yeah.
That would bring everything together, and not to bring things back to Cobra Kai, but a lot of that show is the philosophies and perspectives of the different characters and kind of showing their point of view. And then also like the ways it blends with different characters, like when they work together, like characters that hate each other will end up like working together.
For sure.
So very much like you're like the sum of all your parts, so to speak, of like all the people you work with, and that like kind of builds together like the way that you view your own style of teaching.
Right. Absolutely. No, I mean, that's 100% true. And I mean, you run into those, I don't think as, I think when we're talking about the effect of the drama of that for the show, in reality, it's usually the other way, right? To get the same amount of drama. Usually it's like two friends who were training together and then there's a falling out, right? And then one guy goes here and does this and another guy goes here, instead of like two enemies coming together. Yeah. But that does happen. I mean, it's happened to me. I wouldn't say like enemies, but people were, I would be like, oh, this guy, you know, I don't like this guy. And then they'd come into training, and maybe at first even you didn't know them beforehand, but you go, I don't know if I like this guy. I don't know if they're my type of guy. And then just over time, before you know it, they're your guy.
Yeah,
you know, you're training with them all the time. And I think that is one of the big benefits of martial arts, is like bringing people together who normally you wouldn't think get along, or, you know, for whatever reason, and basically making them work together, you know. And you kind of have to do it, and you have to be respectful of each other. And to me, that is one of the big things with you can't beat like the drama the other way, you know, like there's always drama and interesting stuff. But yeah, that is, they definitely do a good job at dramatizing that aspect of it, you know. It's very cool. Yeah. And like I said, I got to catch up on the newer seasons.
Yeah, I hope I'm motivating you too,
Yes,
because
you
it's
are,
a really
absolutely.
awesome show.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of things in life, it's about forming a community,
Absolutely.
and the ways that reflects your own life, which leads us very well into our next topic, which is how has martial arts helped you in other aspects of your life, like realize things about yourself?
Yeah. And you'll hear this a lot from any martial arts instructor, you know, even when I was a kid, it was always about, this isn't just stuff you're going to use in here in the dojo or in the gym, or this is stuff that's going to reflect how you treat other people, how you know, for kids, how you perform at school, you know, and that stuff definitely comes into play still as an adult. It's something that never goes away. Like the benefits, you know, that you're going to get, you're going to build confidence, those types of things, you know. And I was a really self-conscious, unconfident like kid and teenager. I was very introverted, and the only time that I ever felt comfortable is when I had something to kind of pour myself into, right? I used to be a musician, so like I couldn't sit in a room and talk to people and have a conversation, but I can perform on stage. Like I can be in front of, I couldn't talk to 5 people in a room, but I can be on stage in front of 500 people and not have a problem. And I think martial arts has helped me with that for sure. I used to have like nightmares about public speaking, you know, and although I still do a little bit depending on what the topic is going to be, I feel like this has given me so much practice, especially here at Quinnipiac, because every semester is a new group of students. And I might have, you know, 1 or 2 students who have taken one of my other classes and are taking a new class. But for the most part, it's completely new students every semester. And that has changed the way that I'm able to speak in front of a group, and my confidence with the way that I teach and my material and how I present things, and the way I want to represent myself, and my professionalism, or sometimes lack thereof, which is something I'm still working on. But even when I had a day job, it really allowed me the confidence to do things that I probably wouldn't have done if I didn't have the support of martial arts and that community behind me, and the way that it kind of boosts your personality a little bit. You know, I remember when I worked in a manufacturing plant, they would always need people to do other things, you know, and can you run this machine? I never said no. You know, it's, yes, I can do it, you know, and I'll figure it out, and I'll learn how to do it. I think if I didn't have the training that I had, I probably wouldn't have had that confidence to do that. Didn't always work out. Sometimes I just didn't know how to do it, but I was always willing to kind of take that risk and that chance and try to embrace that challenge a little bit. And martial arts is really good for that. And there's something to be said about doing hard physical things and how that affects your mettle, right? Your grit, your ability to like push through hard things in life, and testing those things in the gym, and constantly forcing yourself to be on a schedule of hard training, and you know, all this like physical pain and also mental pain, you know. Training can often be just as taxing mentally as it is physically. Makes everything else that you're gonna experience almost kind of seem like not that big of a deal, you know. So it really can bleed through to your family life, to your work, your relationships with other people. I've seen as an instructor, it's happened with me, as I just mentioned, but I've seen as an instructor over the years, starting with a student who very timid, very shy, you know, after they've been training 4 or 5 years, they're the complete opposite person because of, and you, it'd be one thing if I saw them at the beginning and then at the end I can go, oh, well, you're just older now, so a lot of stuff is happening. But I see that person from age whatever to age whatever all weekly, almost daily sometimes. And I could see the shift and I can see where the things they're doing with their personality are connected directly to the things that we're doing in training. And how the mindset and the mental struggles that we are taking from training are directly affecting their ability to socialize with other people, their self-confidence. That's why I like, at this point in my life, training just civilians and everyday regular people, not so much, you know, the gifted athlete, you know, who's just born with all of those things. I there's something like that I feel personally connected to, helping just, you know, regular people kind of reach those goals, you know? And I mean, that sounds like generic martial arts, like black belt magazine marketing, you know, like come take karate, improve self-confidence, self-esteem, you know, and get fit. But that's all real, you know, and those are big parts of it outside of the physical, like the fighting, you know. Even the physical stuff removed from the actual violence and fighting is working out, you know. So many benefits there.
I mean, not to bring it up again, but like the Karate Kid story, Cobra Kai, it's taking, you know, ragtag bunch of nerds and then teaching them karate and then having them grow as people because of it.
Right.
And it's that essential aspect of like building yourself physically to help build yourself mentally and just gaining confidence, because confidence really is everything. Like not saying no to something, like you said, like that's great advice I've gotten for the film business as well, to just never say no and just go for things. And that's just all builds in confidence.
Yeah, you got to take those chances, you know, safe risks. You know, you don't want to take risks that are going to like destroy you and like destroy, you know. You have to kind of still approach things tactfully, but for most people in most situations, you know, you can afford to take like some risks there, and that's what opens up more doors, you know. And I'm gonna mention it now, but the Karate Kid, where you got this ragtag group of misfits, and what always gets me with those, that also happens in reality. Although it's, you know, they dramatize it way more in like for film, where you got this group of like, let's say 5 people, and they're all like overcoming this stuff, but then there's always one that like takes it too far, and they become like the evil villain, you know what I mean? Like there's no roping them back in, they're just way too far out there, you know. And that, I've seen that happen too, you know. It just makes people, it can, as much as it, you know, they'll say like, you know, training martial arts, it will prevent like people from bullying. You're going to respect people more. You're getting humbled more. So you're more likely to treat people that same way, you know. There's always going to be like one in there that like, nah, it went the other way. Now they're going to use all of this to be bullies or something, you know. And that happens. It's a crazy phenomenon.
They turn to the dark side.
Exactly.
Or, join Cobra Kai.
Exactly.
The cycle. It's interesting that it happens in real life too. People. All power corrupts. Absolutely.
100%. Yep.
Interesting. And kind of moving onwards from martial arts things to like more personal things about you, what are some things that people might not know about you, like fun facts?
All right. Outside of martial arts, there's not a lot anymore. Like being a musician is one. Like a lot of people, if you just came to train with me, you know, you didn't have any prior knowledge of me, you know, you wouldn't know right away that I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I used to play music. I still play music. It's a big part of my life. I think sometimes as martial artists, when you're looking at people who do this, especially for a living, and you only interact with us in our little environment, it's hard to sometimes humanize us a little bit. Like I remember I had a student one time who was like, I don't know what I said or did, or maybe I posted something online, but it was food related, you know, and someone was like, I thought you just ate raw meat all day. And I'm like, okay, like I'm a human too, and I have other interests, you know, and music is a huge part of my life. I mean, martial arts is probably like the 5th thing that I'm good at, you know. I've got music. I'm a really good dad. Like I love spending time with my kids. And I'm a really good cook. A lot of people wouldn't imagine that either, but I'm a good cook. Yeah, those are like, if I had to pick like the 3 kind of like things people wouldn't assume, those are the big ones. Yeah.
What do you like to make?
Oh, everything. Yeah. I mean, we just hosted like 15 people for Thanksgiving. I did 98% of the cooking.
Wow.
I did everything. And I mean, Thanksgiving is Thanksgiving. Everybody knows what goes into that. But I love to cook. I'm always cook. If I had, you know, more time, I'd probably cook more. But now because I don't have time, I find myself just like cooking the things I know I can make quickly. And it comes out good. You know, I'm not experimenting as much as I used to. But yeah, I love cooking.
Yeah. Like karate chopping up the sliced turkey.
I like, even that, like I would be lying if I didn't say I was like, this chef's knife is a sword right now. You know what I mean? Like just being like a little kid with stuff like that.
You should be. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a big one. I think in like a different life, if I wasn't a martial artist, I probably would have wanted to like pursue being a chef.
Interesting. Yeah. And you said you're multi-instrumental, like what instruments do you play?
My main instrument is guitar, but I play drums pretty well. I play bass, and I can, if you put a piano in front of me and needed me to come up with something that fit a song, I could do it, but I can't play piano. You know what I mean? Like I can find the notes and I can find the sounds that I want in the song, but I couldn't just sit down and play the piano. So I'm not a piano player, but I can make some good sounds come out of a piano if I needed to, or a keyboard or something. But guitar, drums, bass, in that order. My dad was a drummer, so I had a leg up there with, you know, being able, always having music and instruments in the house. Something that I try to do for my kids now. You know, there's always music. We're always, and they're kids, so they come in and out of how much they're interested in it, you know. But there's always access to musical instruments and music in the house. Yeah, I think that's really important.
I know it's a great mental builder to play instruments when you're young too.
Absolutely. I missed out on a lot of the formal stuff for that. I'm very self-taught, you know, and I think, you know, the next thing to unlock with that is like reading music, and like I never got good at that stuff. But starting from a really young age, I mean, there's so many studies that show that kids who are able to do that at a young age perform better in school, and especially with math, you know. Something that I'm still terrible at. You know? Like, man, if I just stuck with reading music, I would have been fine. But I don't think it would have worked that way. But yeah.
Yeah. And to kind of pivot a little bit, something we talked about before we started recording is that you're a Bad Friends fan.
Yes.
And you talked about that you would see Bobby Lee in like record stores. You mind telling us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, me and Bobby Lee are buddies. You know? But when I lived in Los Angeles, I lived in Hollywood on Hollywood Boulevard in Wilcox, and we would, again, I haven't, this is long, we're talking, you know, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if the music store is still there, but down on Sunset Boulevard, close to that area, I think it was Sunset and Vine, there used to be a music store called Amoeba Records, and I know they had one in San Francisco too, I think. And you can go in there on any given day and see cool people in there buying records. It was like the place to go in that area to get cool. It was huge, massive record store. They would have live music in there. I saw so many good, we saw like Fishbone, I don't know if you know who that is, play there live like 2 times, you know, just like free shows like that, like really good acts. And a handful of times you'd be in there and Bobby would be in there buying some records, you know, and you could he was always very personable. Bobby Lee, you know. At that time, he was, I don't know if he was still on Mad TV. We're talking like 2002 to 2004 or 5-ish, or coming off of Mad TV. I can't remember, but I knew him. I knew him from Mad TV, you know. So I had been a fan. I loved Bobby Lee, you know, watching, because me and my roommates would watch Mad TV, you know, and then we'd see him at Amoeba, and it was like this crazy thing, you know. But he was cool. He like his. I think at that time I thought his taste in music was a little out there, but like he was a little bit older, and kind of a hipster kind of. So like it's probably stuff now that, looking back, I'd probably be like, oh, I could get into that now, you know. Yeah. But then I was probably like, what is that? You know? But yeah, he was always very personable, very nice, you know, never like any lengthy conversations or anything, but you could see him in passing, and you know, he seemed friendly. He was cool. Yeah,
that's Bobby. Yeah, he is a very genuine, personable guy. Like Ryan and I were able to meet him in LA, and Ryan can attest to it. Ryan got farted on by Bobby Lee.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. You know?
Yeah.
The stories I've heard about him going to the bathroom in his car, you know, he's just like, he doesn't really care about any of that stuff. But and since then I've been a fan, you know, and Tiger Belly, Bad Friends, you know, I love Bobby Lee. He's great.
Yeah, he's awesome. And yeah, getting to work with them was really awesome. I wanted to share that on here because that's so cool to have that overlap.
Yeah. You know, even my wife, who's not like as much into that type of humor, started to warm up to Bobby Lee. Yeah. I would listen to, you know, Tiger Belly or Bad Friends, and she started to realize how funny he was, you know.
Yeah, and the way that him and Andrew and then Andres and Carlos, the way they all, that group there, Makota as well, the way they all like work together, it's just magic.
It's great.
That's why it's so well.
It's, you know, the stars aligned.
Exactly.
For sure, yeah.
It makes something so special. And moving onwards, I'd like to ask you, what's one thing you love and one thing you strongly dislike?
It's just for anything?
Just anything in general.
Oh my God. Man. I dislike a lot of things right now. Okay? I'm like, I find myself becoming like a grumpy old man sometimes, or I hate certain things. Something that I love. I mean, it sounds like a very corny, generic answer, but I love my family. Like I can be with my family, my wife and kids, like all day, every day, you know, like, of course we're human and there are moments I'm like, I need 5 minutes, but I love my family. That's like a big thing. It's become part of like, it's shaped who I am as a person now, you know. Something that I hate. Wow. Man. Bad pizza. I cannot stand it.
We're spoiled being
We're
from
spoiled.
Connecticut.
Yeah, like I hate it. That's a big one. And I hate people. This has become more of an issue recently. Yeah. I hate people who are afraid of who they are. Try to pretend that there's somebody else. It's just, it seems like I've had some experiences lately where that's come up a lot for some reason. Just people trying to pretend they're not who they are, from where they're from. Oh, I hate that. I hate that. Just be who, you know, like, why are you trying to pretend you're, it's like, if you went and spent a year in England going to school and then came back and had an English accent. It's so phony. You know, like I hate that. Yeah, phony people. I was to say that.
Yeah. And authenticity is always,
it's always the best route. You know, no matter what you think anybody else thinks of you, like your idea of how people are going to perceive you. Authenticity is still always the best route. You know, you're just digging yourself into a hole if you're pretending to be somebody you're not, you know?
Yeah. And I really like you bringing up your family. I mean, there's nothing better than love. And building a family like that, it's the ultimate dream.
Yeah. I mean, I find with what I do, I'm so surrounded from a work perspective, but also like as a martial artist, this is not just work for me. It's also a hobby. It's also a passion. It's also like a love of mine. But it's so much, especially from the self-defense perspective, it's so much violence.
Yeah.
You know, and like I think a lot of people would be surprised that when I go home, I'm so tuned out from that. You know, I have to shut that off, and I'm like, I have to replace that with as much love as possible. And I think the balance between the two helps me respect each one a little bit more, you know? Yeah, like I don't watch a lot of action stuff. And it's like I go and put on like cartoons, you know?
Yeah.
I just got to kind of shut that. I get overwhelmed with it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, love and hate are equally as strong on their own pendulums.
Yeah,
very much so.
Absolutely. But hate can consume you, you know, and I found it like not in a way where it was turning me hateful, but just constantly taking in that content, and like it just gets overwhelming, you know. And so, and then like when you're experiencing that level of hate or violence, I should say, when you are in a situation where it's the opposite and there's just so much love, it just it makes that, it amplifies that feeling so much more, you know. It's a interesting balance.
And I appreciate your emphasis on balance, of course, like Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off, but that is, I always feel like the more I experience things, balance is the most important thing to have in life, to not let the scales tip too far. Like one of my favorite quotes is, you know, never letting success get to your head or disappointment get to your heart. Right. Never get too high, never get too low, to always be on that balance.
You can't go wrong with it. I mean, even like, what's the most old school, like spiritual martial art symbolism, right? The yin, the yang.
Yeah.
You have to have that balance. And that goes for training too. Like I know people, you know, not just with martial arts, but like fitness or health in general, like things that you would think are, you know, completely positive things. You could be unbalanced with those too. You know, you could be creating a very unhealthy situation for yourself if you're, I mean, addicted to working out or addicted to like clean eating or something, you know, like, not that they're bad, they're going to be, you know, bad for you in different ways, but are you still like creating healthy habits that are unhealthy because of the way you're kind of just going all in on them? You know, where's the balance? You know, are your healthy eating addiction, how is that affecting everybody else around you, right? And like, balance is everything. You have to have that.
Very, very much agree, because too much of one thing is always bad.
Exactly. I mean, and everyone will argue, well, I could be addicted to something else. And it's like, well, you could be addicted to nothing.
Yeah.
If you just like balance things out a little bit more. Like why are we trading addictions?
Like extremes. Like operating on that level.
Operating on that level. Like we can, like, I think everyone just needs to chill out a little bit on that type of stuff, you know?
Agreed. And moving onwards, I'd like to ask you about like any personal goals you have moving forward.
Yeah. One big one that is a struggle for me now is going back to school. I never really fully got into college, especially like anything that would resemble legit academic, you know, studies. So going almost 20 years with being out of school over that. I mean, probably the last time I was doing any actual school, even music school, when I was in music school, was music school.
Yeah.
You know, it was, I wasn't in a degree program, so I was missing the academic part of it, but was high school. You know, I graduated high school in 2002. So it's been a long time since I've had to study, do homework, like, you know, operate in a class setting, even though right now most of it's online. But that is a big goal for me, is to get some sort of a degree. What that's going to be right now is still kind of up in the air. I got my general studies. I've got my, you know, all my prerequisites and that type of stuff first, but starting small, but that's my next big goal that I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah. I mean, learning is a lifelong process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's great that you're returning now in such a different phase of your life, with a family now, more experience, or martial arts and all your other interests, to return to school. I think there's a different perspective there.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, when I was telling some people my hesitation to go back because I was nervous about how I was going to do, or it was going to be a challenge for me. They were all like, well, you were a different person when you were in high school or even going into college. You 20 years of growing as a person. And that it definitely has made a huge difference. Like once I started, scheduling everything is one thing, like having enough time to do it, but the material itself, I'm like, oh, this is like, it's not that bad. I could do it. I just got to make sure I can balance my life properly and, fit it in. But
that discipline and that focus that you get from martial arts, like it's all present there.
That's a big one. I just had a project where, that was part of the subject, and that was my big answer was I get a lot of my, will to succeed, to like my drive to like see this through and, kind of get, discipline and structure from years of martial arts, directly relates to that.
Yeah. You have to survive and get through that paper. Like you have to survive a fight.
Exactly. And I mean, which one's harder?
Exactly.
I would argue that for me, if that paper needed to be like an oral presentation to the rest of the class, I'd probably rather fight, but that's also growth, pushing me outside of my comfort zone. Growth is in discomfort, right? You have to be doing things that are making you uncomfortable, that you're hesitant about, that you're not unsure of yourself about, in order to grow from it and learn from it, right?
Yeah, be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the ultimate thing. Like I learned when I was playing football, and that a lot of people talk about.
Yep.
And all heck was over. And you talk about being a fan of like Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. I'd ask you, what are some of your favorite movies?
From like Jean-Claude Van Damme,
or just in general, your favorite films?
Oh man, favorite films. I mean, my taste in movies has changed quite a bit from when I was a kid to as an adult, but I still love all of those movies. Like right now I'm at the point where my oldest kid is starting to kind of get into the things that I was into when I was a kid. So like Transformers, Star Wars, we're kind of creeping up on. When he's a little bit older, I'm ready to start showing him those old Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal movies,
Oh my goodness.
And see if they hold up for if he's as interested in them as I was, I am a big, like, from a film, you're a film major, right? So a lot of these answers are probably like kind of boring, like lame, but I'm a big Tarantino fan. Like Pulp Fiction is one of my all-time favorite movies. I like, man, what are some really good movies that I could like watch all the time? Big Fish. It's a great movie. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Great movie. Stuff like that. I kind of like that, like fantasy, but also like, emotional type stuff. I like a good thriller too, though. I like, anything that is, I'm not like big into, every once in a, like last night I just watched the first action movie I've watched in quite a long time, and I regret wasting the time on it. Red One. Oh my god. So I mean, it did its job of being like a goofy action movie, but I'm just like, why did I bother with that? Like, it just didn't do anything for me. There's probably 10 other things that I could have watched that I would have preferred, but when I was a teenager and in college, I loved like horror. I can't watch that stuff anymore. Horror movies and stuff.
It's really interesting that when you show your kids Bloodsport and all those.
I can't wait. Like as a dad who like loved that stuff, and my parents were letting me like all the Schwarzenegger, like Predator. I can't wait to show my kids Predator.
When they're flexing.
Amazing. When they first team up, it's gonna be great. But I'm also nervous that my kids are gonna be like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, But when I was a kid and my dad like showed me stuff from like the movies he liked, there was a cutoff. A lot of them were like Clint Eastwood westerns. Like I didn't like that. You know, my dad was like, this is so good, you know? And I was like, no, this is kind of lame. And then when I got older, I was like, oh, these are kind of badass, you know? You can kind of appreciate it. But I didn't like those. But like the later movies into like the 70s and like the Warriors and stuff, I loved that stuff, you know? So I'm worried about, I'm like, where's my cutoff for where my kids are going to think my taste in movies is too lame? I hope it's not Predator. That'll crush me as a dad, you know?
Yeah, I mean, films change as you age, and like, even if they don't like it when they're young, they could get older and then be like, oh, this is sick.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's kind of,
I feel like we're in a different time now where like, you know, movies are one thing, but like TV series are so much more. Like I find I watch more of those now than movies, you know? For every like one movie I watch, I probably am into like 6 or 7 different TV series, you know? Yeah,
TV's kind of become like movies in that way, becoming way more sophisticated, kind of like in the post-Sopranos world now, especially with all streaming and things like that.
Sopranos was the big, right? The Wire, those were like the big first ones. So, but I think you're like, oh, you get way more in depth and involved in the characters, but then it also kind of like goes too far sometimes. You're like, we're in season 13 here. It's like, come on, let's wrap this up, you know? Exactly. But a good middle ground is where it's at with the series.
Exactly. Yeah. And speaking of wrapping things up, Coach, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. And do you have anything you'd like to add before we finish things up here?
No, I don't want to do any like, you know, I'm sure people like self-promote. I don't want to do any of that. I think it'll just make me feel uncomfortable.
No motivational quotes or anything?
But this was my first podcast. And it was great. I think you're great. I love your podcast. I got to listen to a couple episodes, and I appreciate, like, if I'm going to do a first one, I think this is a good first one.
Perfect.
It's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Coach. This is one of my most fascinating episodes, getting to hear about you, your kind of mindset as a fighter, your career. It was really, really excellent. Like, you're a very great speaker, and you'll have a great voice in this world if you choose to make your own show or do things like that. I
appreciate that. Thank you. And I hope so. I hope it wasn't, I'm always worried it's going to be boring. Who wants to hear this? You know?
It's the exact opposite.
Okay, good.
And it's been so great getting to learn from you as a student, getting to see you operate, see you teach, and learn martial arts, which is something I've always been interested in, but never really stepped into before your class. And you're a really great teacher and made me more curious and wanting to learn more about it.
Well, you're a good learner. The feeling is mutual, and I hope you are able to, you know, find more training, and hopefully it becomes a passion. You know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely something I'm interested in and want to gain more interest in. And of course, Coach, I'd like to thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Of course. And as always, this is Ryan Zicast with the Zicast, where everyone has a story. Signing off. Thank you so much for watching.